We talked slightly about al-Masih al-Dajjal. Let's look into that hadith and just kind of go over what we talked about before. Let's take out that one, and let's just kind of refresh what we talked about yesterday. Okay, let's see. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من عذاب القبر ومن عذاب جهنم ومن فتنة المحيا والممات ومن شر فتنة المسيح الدجال. We said, Ya Allah, I seek refuge in you from the torments of hellfire. And we talked about the torments of hellfire, what that hadith basically tell us in that regards. And we talked about the different things that lead to the torments of hellfire. We talked about the ayat that prove النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا أدخلوا آل فرعون أشد العذاب. We talked about how it's giving me the indication, or at least the inference that they were actually exposed to a certain punishment in the barzakh. And we said barzakh is pretty much the place or the timing between life and death. So each person would be living in their own barzakh, but there's a barzakh in general. Okay. And death, or okay, let me correct that. Between not life and death. No, it's after death, between life and after the person dies, and before the person gets to Yawm al-Qiyamah. Okay, this is barzakh. Barzakh would be between life and Yawm al-Qiyamah. Did I say before death? No. So barzakh is the life between life and, in other words, existence and judgment day. In other words, after death. The life after death and before Yawm al-Qiyamah is called barzakh. Okay? And we talked about adhab al-qabr, that it's not exclusive to the disbelievers, but nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah. What does nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah mean? Nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah means we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from what we're talking about. So nas'Alullah, we ask Allah al-afu. Al-afu means dismissal from deserving such a punishment. Al-afiyah, protection, and basically security from such punishment. So if I were to talk about Jahannam, I'll say Nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah. That's a duaa. That's an invocation. Ya Allah, I ask you to protect me from this and give me complete peace. Al-afiyah would be complete peace. Al-afiyah would be health. Al-afiyah would be security, would be safety. So when I would say adhab al-qabr, you would hear me say Nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah. Let me write that word down, right? So that way we could memorize it. Nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-afu. Al-afu, dismissal from the punishment. Al-afiyah means security, health, peace. That's al-afiyah. So nas'alullah, we ask Allah, al-afu, dismissal from punishment, al-afiyah, complete protection. Okay, so whether we're speaking about adhab al-qabr or adhab jahannam, and fitnat al-mahya wal-mamat, we also went in little bit of detail, fitnat al-mahya, all the different trials that one would go through in this life, whether we're speaking about the trials of sin or whether we're speaking about the different trials of different pains, losing a loved one, perhaps maybe just different hardships that you're probably coming across, or maybe, hey, you lost wealth, you probably maybe lost your job, probably got sick, etc. That's fitnat al-mahya. Il-mamat, the fitna of il-mamat, is basically going to be the different fitan that happen while the person is dying or after. So what does that mean? So il-mamat, while the person is dying, they're probably under the stress of their soul departing their body. The pain is definitely immense pain. So in that situation, al-umur or al-a'mal bi khawatimiha. It all depends on our ending and what we had done, and then that's basically going to affect what determines our Jannah or our hellfire. Okay, so when we're speaking about il-mamat, while during the process of dying, or whether before we die, meaning the last times in our life, what would be the result of my death? What would happen after my death? How and on what status am I on before my death? Okay, so that's what that would basically mean. Okay, fitnat al-mahya would be the different fitan that I would be living in while I'm alive, the different trials, the different hardships, and it doesn't have to be evil. Okay, it doesn't have to be evil because remember, وَنَبْلُوَكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ fitna, that you would be basically pricked with evil as an ibtila, as a test. But khair is also a fitna. So what does that mean? Khair is a fitna. So does that mean that it's evil? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's evil, but it means that il-khair, or what is good, in general, it is good, but if it is used for the wrong thing, it will be a fitna. It will be an evil thing, and it will result into an evil thing. It's a fitna. Okay. من شر فتنة المسيح الدجال, and from the evils of the different trials of al-Masih. Al-Masih, we said al-Masih means to wipe, but whether it's referring to his eye being wiped, because remember, he's got one eye that's basically pushed out and another eye that's basically wiped. In other words, it's not there. Okay. As a result of deformity, was he born that way? In the end, he's got one eye. What the other eye is basically deformed. Okay, so, or does that mean that al-Masih, meaning to wipe something on earth? Because al-Masih, Isa ibn Maryam, he wipes the earth with peace, and this guy wipes the earth with delusion, because he himself is an imposter. Okay, he's a liar in the beginning, basically is coming in to just present himself as a good person, a person that is coming to bring in, success to the people, etc. Then he presents himself as a prophet, and then finally presents himself as a god himself. Okay, and that's Awad al-Dajjal. And we know the stories of Awad al-Dajjal, so that's inshallah, maybe one day we'll go into details. This is the hadith that we're supposed to be doing today. Okay, let's actually do that. Here we go. We're gonna make this be something that is accessible for everyone, and we're going to do that. Hold on, because I want you in the favorites, and I want you to see Hisn al-Muslim based on, you know, those. Okay, let's see. Here we go. And
What does it mean by that?
what is it? What? What was that?
فتنة المسام والمغارم. What does that mean?
What is the word?
There's another word I couldn't even say properly. Let's say that. Where the dua goes.
Begin from the beginning, and I'll probably figure it out.
أعوذ بك من المسائم من المعصم والمغارم.
المغرم. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, inshallah, right now. Yeah, this one. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's what we're doing, inshallah. Okay, so this is the dua that we're doing. Allahumma, here it is. Inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr. Wa a'udhu bika min fitnati al-Masih al-Dajjal. وأعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من المأثم والمغرم. So this one, we have done it before. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika. When are we saying this, by the way? We're doing this after tashahud. Which tashahud? This is talking about a tashahud al-akhir, the last tashahud. When we're about to, after we say at-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salatu at-tayyibat, etc., and Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad, etc., when we complete everything, and before we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, we make these du'as. You could do all of them, or you could choose one of them. Okay, what is the du'a? Is this a sunnah or obligatory? This is sunnah. What does that mean? You would get rewarded for doing it, and the Prophet ﷺ was doing it, but if you don't do it, your prayer is still valid. Okay, let's see. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr wa a'udhu bika min fitnati al-masih ad-dajjal wa a'udhu bika min fitnati al-mahya wal-mamat. So up until here, if we're talking about adhab al-qabr, we talked about that yesterday. Al-masih ad-dajjal, we basically talked about this yesterday. أعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات. We talked about this yesterday. It's right here. You could see it's kind of, I guess, just sure. Okay, but so عذاب القبر, Jahannam here, and here it didn't really mention Jahannam, but then المسيح الدجال and فتنة المحيا والممات. Here, Masih al-Dajjal, put him at the last thing. Here, put Masih al-Dajjal, basically the second thing. In order or not in order, at the end, we're talking about the letter wa. Okay? Well, the letter wa can actually mean just a general addition. Just a general addition. So, does it necessarily mean in order? Just a general addition. It can mean that. Okay. Now, going back to this one. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من المأثم والمغرم. How is that different? Ya Allah, I seek refuge in you from al-ma'tham. What is al-ma'tham? Let's see how they translated it here. Right there, from sin and debt. Excellent translation. Excellent translation. Al-ma'tham. When you look at al-ma'tham, al-maghram, in Lugha Arabiya, whenever you would see a letter, the letter meme, okay, hold on, let me just take this one out. Okay, when you see ma'tham, maghram, etc., this meme right there, and coming in with the second letter having a sukoon, and in this way, that is to basically refer to anything that leads to. So, al-ma'tham, you're seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from anything that leads to sin. So it's not sin completely, but it's actually anything that leads to sin. And the implications of sin. So what does that look like? So, for example, a person probably went to a public school. And in public school, there's a lot of sin. Okay? And the person goes to a public school, and there's a lot of sin right there. And later, as a result of that normalization of that sin, this person became so normalized that they became numb to recognizing the sin, and they became so normalized, and now they became so used to major sins that might actually result from what was in the beginning, well, I was just going to school. But they went to school, at least in a public school, there was ikhtilat. They got so normalized with the girls and boys talking to each other. And then, of course, later on, from talking to each other, talking about perhaps school, then later on it became, yes, well, this is a boyfriend, this is a girlfriend. Now they normalize this relationship, or what is al-akhdan. That's what the Quran calls it. Al-akhdan, basically to normalize a relationship, having a crush, having this love relationship, romantic relationship outside of marriage, etc. And then later on, it led This actually led to a major sin into putting them into al-ma'tham, perhaps of zina, and the list goes on and on. So that's al-ma'tham. Al-ma'tham
Is
is
it
what,
the
yep.
sorry? Is it the ولا متخذات أخدان? Is it the same one?
Absolutely. It's ولا متخذات أخدان.
Exactly.
What is المتخذات أخدان? The women that would basically take as boyfriends. Men as boyfriends and as lovers, and yes, they're in a relationship, etc. That's متخذات أخدان.
Ya Allah, the first time I know its meaning.
Yeah, of course.
How many times we repeat it, subhanallah.
Absolutely.
Jazakallah khair, fatah
What
Allah.
we're absolutely, so when we're saying أعوذ بك من المأثم والمغرم, I may not recognize that this is leading me to sin. So I'm seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, protect me from the things that lead me to sin. So that's why if you were to look at certain sins, if you were to analyze certain sins, you would see that certain sins, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. لا تقربوا. Don't even get near it. And for al-khamr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَجْتَنِبُوهَ. Stay away from it. And that's that idea, the concept of it. Il-ma'tham, there are certain sins, don't even normalize, don't even get near. Because it will have its attraction. It will have its attraction. It will have that the beginning of sin. In the beginning, you're just seeing it. You're familiarizing yourself with it. And then later on, you're normalizing yourself with it. You're basically becoming closer and closer. You're getting closer to it. Then you're embracing it. Then you're practicing it. So this is al-ma'tham. Al-ma'tham is letting us know that there are certain sins that you want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you from, one, approaching it, normalizing it, and practicing it. Because that's the category. And this is why the word al-ma'tham is a very intricate word. It's not saying a'udhu bika min al-ithm, just sin. No. It went farther. Al-ma'tham, what leads to sin and what would give a bigger effect on me and probably let me indulge in sin and be a person that practices. I didn't even recognize that going to public school was going to lead me to this. So I seek refuge in you from anything that might let me normalize ithm, from not letting me normalize sin. So I'm asking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the beginning, or even what leads to the beginning before even me getting to sin. If I were to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ithm, Ya Allah, I seek refuge in you from sin. This is just talking about the sin itself. But going to public school is not a sin, right? I'm just giving an example. At least in America, I'm talking about American public schools, okay? Going to public school is not a sin, but it's not a sin in its own. It would be a sin if I were, for example, to engage in something haram, to look at something haram, etc. That would be a sin. But al-ma'tham, we're talking about the atmosphere, we're talking about the normalization, we're talking about the implication of sin and what that leads to in total embracement later on. This is, it's kind of like saying, this is taking you a mile before sin and a mile after. All right, and that's why when you read the ayah, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, it's not, don't even approach. But did the person actually commit zina by probably going to a nightclub? Okay. Yes, they just committed a sin, just being around, khamar, being around probably dancing, being around this type of music or whatever it is. Yes, they're putting themselves, but did they actually engage in the actual ma'asiyah? They just went to a prom Okay, she said, I'm going to a prom. Can I go to a prom? And in the prom, I'm not going to dress inappropriately. I'll be wearing my hijab and I'll go to the prom. I'll sit away from the khamar and I'll sit away from that and I'll just be on my own. I'll say, wait a minute, this is ma'tham. It's absolutely haram. Even if you're in your hijab, this area is polluted with ithm. This area is polluted with ithm. It does not be fit. It does not be fit for a Muslim man or a Muslim woman to be in an area of ma'tham, in the atmosphere, in the environment, into normalizing ithm, into normalizing fitna, normalizing ithm, then what you are going to take yourself into is the destiny of the result of ithm and basically normalizing it, accepting it, and later on becoming a part of it. When I was in high school, of course, when you're in high school, getting close to graduating, they'll basically give you cards to invite you to proms and all of that. And certainly, I know what a prom is, but of course, I'm not going to go to it. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us steadfast. But even during my teenage, I did not engage in any of this deviation. Alhamdulillah. So, the girls started asking me if I was going to go to the prom, and they were telling me about how fun it is, and I'm just listening. And right before their eyes, I ripped the prom invitation, and that's when they were just in shock that this is something that all girls and all teenagers, this is like an event that everybody looks forward to. But I just ripped it right before their eyes. I'm like, absolutely not. There are certain things that you shouldn't even second think or even think twice about it. This is an area of fitna. You don't belong there. Wal-maghram. What is al-maghram? There is another hadith. Certainly it is debt. So they did translate debt. But there is another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, when asked about, well, why are we making a dua from al-maghram? If we said il-ma'tham, what leads to itham and the atmosphere, blah, 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 all that, how is al-maghram with the same idea? So al-maghram, the Prophet ﷺ explains, he said, if a person goes into debt, they'll be asked to pay the debt, and then they'll start procrastinating and then make up excuses, which basically eventually is going to be within the area of lying. So the Prophet ﷺ taught them to make the dua to seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from debt, which is basically making a loan. And the implication of that is that the person is going to eventually lie and etc. But is seeking a loan. I'm not talking about an interest loan, okay? A loan with interest. I'm actually talking about just a general loan. I'm going to Medina and I said, hey, can you basically let me borrow $500, okay? And she says, sure. And I'm using this money to, I don't know, pay my phone bill. Okay. So, is that haram? The answer is no. But what if I was using this money not to pay a phone bill or water bill or whatever, but I'm using it because, hey, my daughter wanted to, I don't know, celebrate her graduation, and I wanted to buy the cake that she dreamed of having on her graduation party. Okay, so what did I use that for? I basically used it for a cake. There's darura, and there's a tahsinat, and there's al-hajiyat. Now, this is not even darurat, and definitely not even hajiyat. It's not even the needs, and certainly it's way farther. It's just some teenage girl just wished of having that cake, but not having it doesn't necessarily change anything in her life. Okay, so now is that loan that I had taken to buy something trivial, is that equal to something that, well, I'm basically buying food for survival, or probably covering maybe gas, whatever it is. Okay, so in
No.
that situation, that's completely different. So
Yeah.
when we're speaking about al-maghram, number one, the first opinion is that no, this is talking about loan in general. Whether you're in debt for a good thing, like I'm trying to pay my bill, or whether we're speaking about something trivial. Oh, graduation cake party, whatever. Okay. What did I say it right? Yeah, whatever. Okay. And whether we're speaking about al-maghram, number one is that you've got all debt is included. Al-maghram, any debt, whether for a good cause or whether for a trivial cause. And why are we seeking refuge in that? Is it haram? Well, it's not haram, but you need to recognize the implication of it. The implication of it that you have to pay it off. If you are not capable of paying it off, then al-ghunmu bil-ghurm, your children are the ones that are responsible to pay off this debt. And what if they don't pay it off? Well, you're going to be held accountable on Judgment Day. And at the end, the Prophet ﷺ asked us to make the du'a, not only the impact of dain or al-maghram or debt on a person in this life, but also the impact that it will have on them on Judgment Day, or even in the grave. So what are we asking for? We're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the protection from the implication of debt and how we might lose our honor because of debt, and certainly all the things that may lead us to even seeking a loan. In other words, Ya Allah, give me rizq where I don't need to go and seek someone else for a loan or for rizq. I would only seek you. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to seek honor. And when a person asks someone for money, it basically takes them into feeling in debt to these people. And they had certainly lost a certain level of their honor. They had lost a piece of themselves, of what their honor really means, what their contribution really means, and they would feel vulnerable that their survival is dependent on others. And if you would live that your survival is dependent on others, you would eventually start feeling that they have an upper hand, they have an authority over you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to be a person of freedom, wants you to be a person of honor, wants you to be a person of independence. And that's why we would make the dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu min al-ma'thami wal-maghram. So here's a question. If we're talking about maghram and we're talking about ma'tham, are they in the same category or is this different? You would say apples and oranges. Okay. And you could say apples, meaning, I don't know, Granny Smith, Pink Lady apples, and go on and on. Okay. In other words, from the same category, from the same classification. Or is this a different classification, like apples and oranges? So al-ma'tham and al-maghram. المأثم would be a burden in the hereafter more. المغرم would be a burden in this dunya. You feel that it's a weight on you. The weight is also the weight, الإثم is on the soul, and المغرم is a weight on a person's psychology, is a weight on a person's social status, is a weight on a person's on a person's value without them realizing. It's going to affect them. It's going to affect their status. It's going to affect their psychology, and certainly asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you basically al-amal al-salih would be the opposite of al-ma'tham. Al-maghram would be rizq, the opposite of it at least. The opposite would be rizq. So you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you steadfastness in what is good by saying a'udhu bika min al-ma'tham. And you're also saying, Ya Allah, give me rizq, and that way I won't need to go for others, and that way I won't need to seek different ways to protect my honor, probably by lying, procrastinating, and the person's coming to me, where's my money? I need my money. I'm in such and such situation. You gotta figure it out. And you're right there. It's like, where am I gonna get the money from? All right. So what you're doing is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ma'thami wal-maghram. That's the dua. So this is it, inshallah. Man, I really feel I need to do this one. But inshallah, khalas, we'll do these 3 tomorrow. Inshallah. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik. Astaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustaz. I have questions.
Go ahead, dear. Go ahead.
Okay, so when you institute, can you make Quranic du'as?
When you're in sujood, no, dear. Quranic du'as, no.
Okay, but can you make it the last atahiyat, the last one, tashahud?
So, okay, let me first, before I answer that other question, what do you mean by Quranic du'as? Are we talking about ربنا وتقبل دعاء, for example? I'm saying ربنا وتقبل.
Something like that.
Okay, if you're during sujood, you don't read Quran during sujood. But if let's say you're making a Quranic dua, like what? وَجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا اللهم اجعلني للمتقين إماما, and I'm doing it, for example, in sujood. Is that permissible? It is. All right? الله يحفظك زينب حبيبة قلبي, الله يرضى عنك يا ربي, الله يرضى عنك. So, any other question? Did I answer that one, Bisharo?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I love class. I'm so glad I'm a part of it now. Like it's like you're still in the masjid with us, you know.
There you go. I'm still there, alhamdulillah. I'm still there.
Samsam. Is Samsam still here? We were over.
No, she probably just went
we're
to
trying
sleep.
to call you other night. We were like, we want to call Sister Aisha, but didn't
Inshallah.
have
Sister Martina, you had a question, dear. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. When some the Muslim sister, when they have wedding, they have like a music party, henna party, and if we go there, that's a ma'asim also, right?
Why? She's just having a party. Why is that ma'tham? I'm supporting her in her henna party and putting henna on my hands too.
And the music there, the dance there.
Okay, so here's the thing. Is music all haram? I do have a whole video on that, and I'll make the story short. Not all music is haram. You've got the lyrics, you've got the musical instruments. I've got a whole video, so check that one out. So I wouldn't necessarily consider all of that haram. Number 2, not all dancing is haram either.
Oh,
At least I'm talking
that
about
I need
women
to do.
dancing in front of women, okay? Not all dancing is haram either, so that's a whole different thing to discuss. And especially if we're talking about she's doing a henna party because she had a baby, or because graduated,
Wedding.
or probably wedding, etc. Is it
Yeah.
necessarily all haram? I've got a whole video, check it out. Just type in Aisha was in music on YouTube, and you'll be able to see. It's almost 22 minutes, and I discuss the different things in relationship to music and lyrics and what other evidences are there. But I'll just summarize one quick note. Okay, if the lyrics do not contain shirk, okay, do not contain descriptions of ma'tham, well, what are we talking about? Maybe girls and boys and love and, haram things. That's ma'tham, okay? Then so it doesn't contain sin. It doesn't contain an introduction or in any shape or form speaking about maybe describing girls' bodies, men's bodies, etc., or probably inviting them to sin, etc., then that would not be, okay, the lyrics of it, that would not be a haram lyric. But if it contains any of that, that means it's a haram lyric. As for the musical instruments, I'll make the story short. There's a huge debate, and I mean a huge debate between scholars. And the first opinion basically said that all music instruments are haram except tambourines that would be one used by women only during the Eid or probably weddings, tambourines only. The second opinion said no, it's not just tambourines, but it would be different kinds of percussions. We're talking about different kinds of drums, different kinds of all the different kinds of drums. Okay. The third opinion actually included not only drums, but included other musical instruments, like string instruments. Okay. And the fourth, and therefore excluding, in the third opinion, excluding different kinds of flutes, saxophones, flutes, I don't know, French horn, clarinet, all of those, those would be different kinds of flutes. Okay. So they're basically, whether we're talking about bass flutes, or whether or bass instruments, or whether we're speaking about basically things that you would blow in. Okay. Meaning string instruments, violin, for example, that would, or guitar, etc., according to the third opinion, is not haram. Okay. The fourth opinion, yeah, basically regarded that all musical instruments are halal. Okay. And that was the opinion of Ibn Hazm, regarded that there's no evidence to say that any musical instrument is haram, and regarded that that the hadith, and specifically the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, that سيأتي زمان على أمتي يستحلون الحرى والحرير والقينات والمعازف, that was actually talking about a specific environment. It contains cinema, it contains music, in other words, kind of looking like a nightclub or something. Okay. And that it's not necessarily the music itself. Okay. So things like the different nasheeds that might have maybe a piano, and they're using probably the sound effects, and probably, I don't know, and a clarinet or whatever it is, that's basically according to that opinion. Okay. Now, one thing I will say, a quote from Shawkani. Okay. Shawkani had said, because in response to some scholars that said that there is a unanimous agreement, إجماع على تحريم المعازف, على that the different musical instruments are haram. Shawkani, who died 1250 year Hijriya, he was originally from Yemen, and he was also a Qadi, and at one point he was Zaidi and then became Sunni. Shafi'i. Okay. he wrote a book, إبطال الإجماع على تحريم السماع. إبطال الإجماع على تحريم السماع. That there is basically refuting and considering that there is no unanimous agreement that listening to music is necessarily haram. We're not talking about music that contains haram lyrics or contains probably, just different haram things. We're talking about, hey, we're singing a song, raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. Okay, we're singing basically a song that basically is, singing something like that. It's innocent. It's not inviting to shirk, and not inviting to haram, not inviting to sin, to major things. And the music, we're talking about musical instruments. Okay, so is there a unanimous agreement? The answer is no, and therefore, what would be the best approach then? Avoiding music is definitely the best. Why? الخروج من الخلاف أولى. Staying on the safe side and away from the differences of opinions is always best. Okay, is always best. And what about dancing? Dancing, it depends on what kind of dancing. If we're talking about dancing, it's definitely خوارم المروءة. There's no doubt. خوارم المروءة. It's definitely not an honorable thing. Okay. But at the same time, I would say it depends on the age, it depends on who's present, it depends on what is actually done, the movements. Some movements are supposed to mimic different animals, like the Egyptian music is mimicking snakes. Okay. Indian music is mimicking harvest and picking up the harvest, and and these movements we're picking up the harvest, we're putting it up on shoulders, we're putting it, etc., we're moving, etc. So it's mimicking that. It's mimicking farming. Other music is probably mimicking goats, ironically, like the other music in الدحية. If you were to listen to الدحية, it sounds very Bedouin, and even their movement with their heads and necks, it's mimicking goats. Same thing for looking at, for example, the Sudani movement, so not all, but some, it's basically mimicking the simple Bedouin lifestyle. So every movement, okay, every movement basically has a certain meaning. So if the movement in itself, along with probably the types of clothes, I mean, you cannot compare the Indian clothing and what they would be wearing, okay, compared to, for example, the belly dancing and what they would wear and all of that, because there's no comparison. In one type of clothing is revealing something, or in an exotic way, and another type of clothing is definitely not revealing the same. She's even covering her head, and yes, a little bit of her stomach is showing, but definitely all dressed compared to the exotic belly dancing attire that more looks like Tarzan than anything else. Okay. I mean, yeah, so I don't think there's any comparison. You know exactly what I'm talking about, but just laying it out right there. So is it خوارم المروءة? It's خوارم المروءة. What is خوارم المروءة? خوارم المروءة meaning it's not something that a person of honor would do. You would definitely not like seeing a sheikh or a sheikha, for example, dancing such dance or poses. You would not want to say that, because you would be like, they belong in more honorable areas than areas and positions where they're putting in such practices that is basically set to bring attraction. Dancing, we would say it's a way to bring attraction. It's a way to basically expose. That's what it's all about. That's what dancing does. Yes, certainly some dancing, it's basically to present happiness. Okay. Present happiness because we would move when we're excited. We move when we're excited. So sometimes can we make a certain rhythm of movement when we're excited to show a different kind of excitement, to move along the rhythm. Okay, that's that area. And it's quite interesting
So you can
that some
do
people went to.
exercise during the
Okay, there you go, Zumba. Okay, and exercising, for example, like I said, it depends on the atmosphere, it depends on all of that, and I'm just laying it out for you. It's quite strange that some people actually used Kitab al-Mas'udi. It's called Muruj al-Dhahab. Muruj al-Dhahab is it's almost in 25 volumes or so, and in that book, I remember even, I think it was I think it was volume 16. Correct me if I'm wrong, but anyhow, he was talking about the different cultures in dancing and where it's coming from. And although he was a 4th century, 300 and something is when he died in, but we cannot use that reference as an evidence to prove that it's halal, because that was more of a book that was describing the different cultures, that whether we're talking about the Persians, whether we're talking about India, or China, Japan, whatever it is, each one has their movement, whether it's mimicking a movement of what they would consider as the movement, a god's movement, their gods at least, like the Hindus. It's a certain movement with the hands and a certain movement with the eyes, a certain movement with the body, and all of that is to resemble a certain thing, or whether we're speaking about a movement to show attraction and what that looks like. What do we mean by attraction? So he was talking about those different cultures, but talking about those different cultures does not necessarily mean that it's halal. Okay, describing those cultures, whether we're talking about different cultures in music and the sound of it, could say, for example, the certain countries prefer sad tunes. Okay, the Kurds, the Iraqis, the sad tune is always present. Always present, even the sad tune, and even if you're talking about the harmonies, the sad tune, Nahawand, Iraq, etc. It's always a sad tune. And same thing when they do have those happy tunes, but definitely when you compare it to the other, same thing if to the other cultures that probably faced a sad thing. You're talking about African Americans at one point. They were experts in the blues. It was to talk about the slavery and the history of slavery. So they were, you would see Ray Charles when he was singing, he would be crying while he was singing. It was the blues. And certainly later on, of course. Okay, now we're going to a different area, by the way. I was, just a note, maybe I shouldn't be saying this right now, but I was, and I have a very musical ear. I mean, a really, really musical ear. And I can hear a tune once and I can repeat it, and my brain would just pick it up right away. And in fact, when I first learned the Quran, because of the musical ear that I have, I first learned it remembering the sound of it, and it would stick into my head, and I would sing it in my mind. And I was part of the orchestra, and even was part of the band and all of that. That was early childhood, but yeah. So I've got this part of me, and going from music to that area, but that doesn't necessarily make it as something that, I'm not saying this as being proud, but I'm just saying to many that would think, oh, it's because you don't recognize music or don't have a feeling for music, etc. And I would quote al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali was one of those scholars. He's Shafi'i, but he was saying when the Prophet ﷺ was going on, he was basically going, it was basically, of course, and it wasn't an expedition per se, but for jihad, but of course, while they were going into whatever mission that they were going for, they had Anjasha. Anjasha was singing. Anjasha was a black slave, and he had a beautiful voice, so he was making a tune and singing. But the tune wasn't only moving the people that were listening to the song, but it was even moving the camels. They would start going faster and faster and faster along with the tune. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ tells Anjasha, Ruwaydan ya Anjasha, lutfan
رفقا بالقوارير
رفقا
رفقا
خلي بالك خلي شوي
ارحموا
رفقا بالقوارير.
Yeah.
And he was telling, slow down, Anjasha, because your tune is making the camels go faster and faster. And these qawarir, whether it means the flask or whether this is talking about the women that were sitting on top of the caravan, that they're going to fall off because they're not going to be capable of holding on tightly when these camels are going too fast and basically going in fast speeds. So al-Ghazali comments on that one. He said, whoever's not moved by music is basically going to be a jilf. That's the word that he used. He was like, they're heartless. They are, they have no emotions because music moves animals, let alone human beings. So there's no way that you can hear a tune and say that I'm not moved by it. You're going to be moved by it, whether it's a sad tune or whether it's a scary tune or whether it's a happy tune, you're going to be moved by it. It will move you. And from that, I would say avoiding music, regardless of the ruling, is always best because it will move you, it will bring an attraction, it will program in your brain, and without you realizing, your brain will start playing that tune. And then if it starts playing that tune, and if you're basically attracted to that sound, it's definitely going to be at the expense of your dhikr. That's the conclusion. It's going to be at the expense of your dhikr. There's a huge difference between the mind and connecting the mind with the tune of dhikr, just like zajal tasbih, like that hadith was saying. In tafsir class, we were doing that. We were doing that hadith, and between a person that, they're continuously just sitting along and just spending hours and hours just listening to music. You would think that I'm just listening to a song, nothing to it, it's in the background, etc., without you realizing it's going to program, it's making a certain tune in your mind without you realizing. So make sure the sound, the zajal, the tune is a tune of dhikr that's always surrounding you. That's to conclude. All right. And for those that, asked about it, I'm not necessarily saying it's haram entirely with those regulations that I had mentioned, but I would say be careful in hooking yourself onto music it's a very slippery slope, not necessarily slippery slope to being, as the scholars would say, that music is Quran al-Shayateen. But I would just say it's a slippery slope. Even if it doesn't put you into sin, it distracts you from what is more honorable, dhikr. Ustaz Umayya, you want to say something, dear?
Yes, it's not related to the music.
Okay.
Is there any ma'sam or ism to do baby shower before the baby born?
This is more culture. It's not haram to do a baby shower. The sunnah is aqiqah, but if the person wanted to do a baby shower before, of course, it depends on the culture. Some cultures do baby showers after the baby is born, and others would do the baby shower before the baby is born. Okay. So
Baby in ilm al-ghaib, we don't know what will happen.
still, it's at the end, tafa'ulan. We're hoping that everything will be good. Okay, everything will be good. Everything will be smooth. So, tafa'ulan, that, hoping bil baraka. So it's not necessarily as, yeah, well, what if something happens? What if something happens at all times?
Yeah, but it looks like as if we said that, yani, Ya Allah, you have to bring him, you have to
No,
baby.
it's an exaggeration. I believe it's an exaggeration. It's some things that we would do tafa'ulan, right? We would do things, and what is tafa'ul? Tafa'ul is like being optimistic, and this is good. Before the baby is born, for example, they wanted to do a baby shower before the baby is born. There's going to be a lot of shopping on her and all of that. We're making, I don't know, we're making a cake, but that's not a cake. It's actually made of diapers and dollars and whatever it is. Okay. And we're bringing clothes as gifts and all of that. They actually surprised me one time. I'll never forget that. I think it was my second baby. I can't remember exactly. And it was Noura. I will remember that. It was Noura. She was like, listen, we've got an event and I need the keys for Gems of Light. We had a building. Okay. So I said, okay, Noura, here it is. She took the keys and she was like, you don't have to come, but we might let you be the guest speaker at the end. I'm like, okay. And I was busy working and doing everything. I was like, okay, good thing I don't have to come, except at the end. So then I go, and when I'm pregnant, I'm somebody that is really pregnant. I mean, I would go 220 pounds. I would get really big, really, really, really big. So going up the stairs was like, oof, I'm carrying the world on my back. And I go up the stairs because Noura calls me and she's like, okay, we're waiting for you to be the guest speaker. And this is an event that she said she was doing. So I go up and I'm like, okay, finally I go up the stairs and my head is down because I'm so tired because I'm really close. Any day I'm due date. So I'm going up and then I raised my head and they were like, surprise! The place was packed. And I started crying, to be honest, because I absolutely did not expect the students and everyone and family and everyone to be there. And that was my first time ever knowing that there's something, at least, the baby shower. I know they were asking me, what is the ruling? I said, it's not haram. And they were telling me of it, and I was like, it's not haram. And it's just a culture. And I did not expect them to ask me because they were wondering if I would be okay with it or not. And I'll never forget that day. And subhanAllah, I'll tell you, I was really struggling financially. So the clothes that they brought and all the different things, it really came on time. It really came on time. Allah yajzihum al-khair, and every single person that contributed. And trust me, it's subhanallah, it's optimism, and it's also support. So it doesn't contradict aqiqah. Al-aqiqah, after the baby is born, it doesn't contradict it.
Yeah.
That's the sunnah. Okay, it doesn't contradict it.
What could you say that baby is not born yet and the mom not have the love day, يعني الحمد لله على السلامة, الحمد لله على سلامتك, يعني not
Still, it's a du'a. It's the du'a that we would be wishful for. We would be optimistic. You know, you could say,
even to say بورك الموهوب, it is not yet وهب.
Okay, after it doesn't. You know, while we're here, just inshallah, Rabbil Alameen, we can make a du'a differently. Ya Allah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this an easy delivery. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a pious child, etc. So at the end, it's a process.
Okay.
Right? It's a process. Can I, you know, I could use the same question. Okay. Can I make a party before the wedding?
For engagement.
Engagement, كتب كتاب, you know, writing the marriage contract. Can I make a party before that? But the actual marriage didn't happen yet. Can I make a party before? You can. خلي الناس تفرح.
أنا اللي معقدتها معناته. هلكت القصة. اوكي جزاك الله خير.
عجبتني انت اللي معقدتي. ما خلي الناس تفرح يا عمي. انت زعلانة ليش؟
الشيء بيعزموا